Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Politico's Chief Executive Officer, Patrick Steele.
Good morning. Patrick Steele. I'm the CEO of Politico. I'm delighted to sit down today with a pioneer of the digital age, Paul Daugherty. He's Accenture's Chief Technology and Innovation Officer, and he is here with us today to talk about his vision for the future. Paul's been with Accenture for over 30 years, and his leadership has been instrumental in evolving Accenture's technology business to respond to changes in the industry. Widely acknowledged as one of the most influential technology thought leaders, Paul is a passionate advocate for gender equality in the workplace and STEM-related inclusion and diversity initiatives. He's co-authored Human and Machine, Reimagining Work in the Age of AI, which is essentially a management playbook for the businesses of AI. And in the book, Paul argues that AI systems are augmenting human capabilities and enabling people and machines to work collaboratively together. So Paul, thank you for being here today, and thank you for Accenture's partnership, supporting the summit in Europe and bringing the Political AI Summit to Washington. So let's get started. It's obviously a slow news day today in Washington. So you've been at Accenture for 30 years. That is the type of tenure that is quite rare today in the age of millennials. So you've seen the evolution of technology firsthand in terms of the impact of technology on business processes. What is it about AI that gets you so excited today about your work at Accenture?
No, it's a great question, and thanks to all of you for attending, and thanks, Patrick, for the partnership with Politico and for the event today. The backdrop here is more broadly what's happening, kind of across industry with technology. If you look back over the last 15 years, many of you may have heard this before, but if you look back 15 years, half of the Fortune 500 from 15 years ago doesn't exist anymore. And if we were to look forward 10 years from now, I would argue that the pace is going to accelerate in terms of the disruption that's happening in corporate America. And if you talk to the CEOs about what's happening, there's surveys that are done every year of the top priorities on CEOs' minds, and often it's geopolitics or it's labor in the workforce and different issues. The number one issue for CEOs right now, by a long shot and a good margin, is technology and the pace of technology disruption on their businesses. And that's been happening with digital disruption, and which has been the largest issue that's been facing CEOs and companies. And now AI is, in our view, the biggest trend that's going to drive the continued disruption, technology disruption, and digital disruption of industries. And the reason we think AI is so important is that it impacts businesses in a different way than some other technologies have. And we believe we need to shift the mindset in business from just thinking about technology automation and technology as cost-cutting and efficiency in organizations to really thinking about technology as a growth driver and a catalyst for creating new growth and new opportunities in business. And that's where AI really comes in, and that's why we wrote the book, and that's why we're doing a lot of the work we're doing at Accenture, is to make sure that we're taking a balanced perspective on how to apply AI to really create transformation and change in companies. Because if we view AI as a tool to just cut jobs, I'm sure we can use it to just cut jobs and just create efficiency. But that's not the key that's not the ticket to success for industry and business. The ticket to success is looking at how to use AI to create new products, better outcomes for people, better outcomes for patients in the healthcare sector, better outcomes for citizens from a public sector perspective, and that's the mindset we need to adopt.
So you announced earnings today. You're a $45 billion revenue company. You're the Chief Technology Officer working across 18 different industry sectors. How important is your work in AI for your company, and just in terms of the focus for Accenture?
It's for us, AI, we believe, is the future of our company, and that's a big statement. We're, as you said, a $40 billion company. We work with all sorts of technologies, and we work with all industries and work across the world. And we really do believe AI is the future of how we're going to operate our company. It's going to transform the way we work, which we can talk about a bit. And we're already retraining our people, investing $1 billion a year in retraining our people for AI to be able to take advantage of the opportunities of AI. And we believe it's the future of the services and the way that we're going to work with our clients going forward. So That's simply put how we see it, and we believe it's a great growth catalyst. And it's really going to be the key to unlocking value in different industries. It's already transforming health and healthcare. It's transforming agriculture. It's transforming financial services, and that's just going to continue.
So you talk about in your book the third wave of business transformation. That's your description of AI. Yeah. Just so everybody, wave one, Henry Ford, the standardization of process, the assembly line. Wave two in the 1990s, the automation of processes. And today, wave number three. As we look to the future, should we be worried about robots coming to take everybody's jobs?
Yeah, I think the narrative on AI has not been helpful, and one of the concerns we have, and why we are producing videos like the one you saw about the positive impacts of AI on fairness, equality, bias, and such, is we do believe technology is neutral. I think everybody in the room probably recognizes that technology is neutral. Any technology, it's how we use it that makes the difference. And we believe that we can use that AI will create positive outcomes. So there's a focus, and the narrative is AI is beating us at all our games and taking all our fun. AI is going to come and take all of our jobs, and AI is going to take over the human race. And we frankly don't believe those things are true, and we have a lot of evidence behind that. Even today, we have 6 million people unemployed in the US, and we have about 6 million open jobs. The issue is matching the right people to the right jobs, and AI can increasingly play a role in helping us educate people faster and prepare people faster for the new jobs that are coming. We talk in the book about something called the missing middle, which we don't think there's been enough focus on, which are the millions and millions of new categories of jobs that AI is creating now. And the real focus we need to have isn't worrying about the lack of jobs. It's worrying about how do we make sure we are designing these new jobs into organizations, that we're preparing people with the skills so that those that are disenfranchised, or those that are automated, whose jobs are automated away, and there will be many whose jobs are automated, make sure that all of those people are ready to take advantage of the new opportunities. So the grand challenge we see is not dealing with the lack of jobs. It's dealing with reskilling to get people into the new jobs.
So let's sort of dive into this topic of reskilling and new skilling. I think in your book you talk about in the short term 2.1 million jobs being created, but 1.8 million jobs being lost. So actually a net positive in terms of job creation. Can you talk about in your own work and with the clients that you work with, how are companies preparing their workers for the AI economy?
Yeah, and there was another study that came out that you may have seen this week from the World Economic Forum, similar study that talked about a net 58 million jobs being created globally by 2022, I think was the timeline. So it was something along the lines of 70 or 80 million jobs being eliminated, and then 130 million jobs being created. So there's more and more data points coming out around this idea of the jobs being created. So that the things that the number one thing we believe we need to shift is shift all of our investments and our structures around lifelong learning for employees. Because this isn't a one-time change where we're going to take somebody and apply AI and say your job's different tomorrow and train you and then you're ready. This is a continuing evolution and progression, and it's been happening already, which is why we have some of the disenchantment we have currently because of waves of automation that have happened. And we've been investing transactionally and episodically in people. We need to change that to continuously investing in talents that people always have the resources available to move ahead. So we believe in lifelong learning platforms. That's where the $1 billion in investment in our company is going to tools that can help people continuously build the new capabilities they need day in, day out, year in, year out. And more companies are starting to do that, but not enough. We did a survey as part of the book we wrote, and 2/3 of executives that we surveyed, global survey, thousands of executives, 2/3 of them believe their workforce is not ready with the right skills for AI. 2/3. 3%, only 3%, said that they're investing in learning and training for those employees. And to me, that's unacceptable, and it's a call to action for the private sector, but also more working with the public sector to do all we can do to build these lifelong learning platforms. Private industry needs to do more on that, but that's not the entire answer, because a large part of our workforce is contingent contract labor that's outside company structures. We have the gig economy. We have a lot of people who are already out of the workforce. How do we provide the right educational mechanisms and shift the mindset from one-time learning, higher education, and entry into the workforce to lifelong learning at multiple transition points over a person's career?
So let's dig into that a little bit more. At the end of the day, Politico sort of sits at the intersection of politics and policy, and the people that are here think every day their livelihoods depend on sort of how Washington will impact their jobs. In your mind, what does the government need to do to take advantage of the benefits of AI while also addressing this inevitable disruption?
Yeah, it's encouraging to me just spending time here in Washington with a number of different policymakers and stakeholders. A lot of the right discussion is happening. I'm seeing a lot of alignment on the right objectives. I think we have OSTP represented. We have members of Congress and staffs represented here, and there's a lot of convergence. OSTP's latest. The latest strategic plan for AI has a lot of the right elements in it. The plan coming out from Congressman Hurd and Kelly, the reports from their committee, have a lot of the right elements in it. Senators Schutz and Gardner came out with a report on AI and government, a lot of the right elements. To me, it's about how do we take the action and consolidate the action to on concrete actions on a defined timeline, because for industry in the U.S. and for the country, we have other countries moving very fast, and we have different approaches being taken around the world, and I think there's an imperative and a mandate for us to move very quickly with concrete actions, and I think that's where we need to shift the focus. So I see a lot of agreement around the principles, and I'd say the principles we talk about are kind of a vision and aligned big R&D plan, coming from the federal government, aligned with industry. Data policy, that data is the fuel of AI, as everybody's, I'm sure, heard many times. We need the right data policy to stimulate innovation in the private sector, and data is an issue for us in the U.S. and access to data, as well as balancing the privacy needs. So that's a complex issue that we need better solutions to. There's the workforce that we've already talked about, with new educational mechanisms across the public and private sector, new incentives like looking at our tax policy and other mechanisms to incent more investment in the workforce and lifelong learning. And then finally, responsible AI, which we really haven't talked about yet. The ethics, as we previewed in that video, the ethics, the accountability, the explainability around AI are critical issues. And we don't believe enough is being done yet in really establishing the framework and guidelines for companies to make sure that they're applying AI in a way that has positive impact. And I think the risk if companies and organizations aren't approaching this, applying AI with a very structured, very specific, responsible AI policy, they're going to get themselves into trouble. Bias, lack of explainability, and these things are real issues that we need to deal with more proactively.
So you talked about 15% of the Fortune 500 companies.
50.
From what? Yeah. Did you say
50% of the Fortune 500 from 15 years ago doesn't exist.
Doesn't exist today, and in 10 years.
10 years, it's going to be faster.
So the White House actually yesterday put out a request for information to update our national strategic plan. They put out a plan sort of in 2016. The White House put a plan out in 2016. This is moving very, very quickly. You talk a lot about your work, the pace of change. Does that present a problem, the government's ability to work in lockstep with the private sector to make the changes in real time?
Yeah, I think that's the mindset we need to have. So meetings like there's a lot of meetings that are pulling the public and private sector together, and that needs to be the approach. This is moving too fast to have, to sort out and think about the regulation and think about the specific frameworks. I think there's new creative approaches. There's things we're working on with parts of the government on things like regulatory sandboxes, where we try things in regulated areas to think about how, what's the right approach to move forward more quickly and not work around, but work with the frameworks that are in place and make faster progress. I think we need more of that kind of dialogue on these areas, especially when it comes to things like like data. As an example, what the FDA did recently, issuing guidelines around how they expect AI to be used in industry, was liberating for industry because it gave, where you might be concerned about where the regulations would go if you're in industry, you saw some guidance on here's what we expect. Those types of things, I think, create really helpful dialogue between the private and public sector. So this dialogue and continued discussion, I think, is really critical.
So the Trump administration is very focused on creating jobs for working class Americans that many feel left behind by this third wave, especially this emerging third wave, and the impact actually may get bigger than what we've seen in the past. You talk in your book about the missing middle. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the missing middle, and is there a place for the American working class in that missing middle? Yeah,
no, it's just, absolutely there is, and we believe it's a big opportunity. So the missing middle, it's page 8 of our book, if you end up getting the book. And it's talked about throughout, and the missing middle is our word for describing the jobs we're not yet thinking about, which is the exciting jobs of the future. For example, we're hiring people in our company as AI trainers, not to tag the data and do the low-level tasks around AI, but behavioral training for the chatbots and virtual agents that hundreds and thousands of companies are implementing right now. Because as you use AI for customer engagement or engaging citizens, the behavior of the AI, the way it interacts, the tone it uses, the personality it exhibits, the way it answers questions on topic or off topic that you can ask these chatbots is critically important. And you need trainers that understand sociology and psychology and human behavior, not to program the AI, but to design the behavior of it. That's a highly in-demand skill that we're not training people enough yet for. That's going to create many job opportunities. That's one among many jobs that we talk about in the missing middle that we think we're overlooking. And you can think about that job in particular. That's not necessarily an advanced degree or a higher ed degree. It's somebody who understands business and people and can construct the right guidelines and train just like we used to train people. And anyway, we have many, many other jobs like that. And the issue is making sure in this third generation of business process that we think differently about how to create these jobs. We think differently about how to automate our business so that we're creating what we call, the term we use is collaborative intelligence, which is putting a person's unique capabilities for the things we do well, extrapolation, creativity, communication, emotion, et cetera, together with the algorithms, the machine learning, the robotics to create better outcomes. And that's what the missing middle is all about.
So we touched briefly on this idea of a national strategic plan. The White House yesterday asking for comment to update our strategic plan. Many other countries have released their own versions of those national strategic plans for AI, China being among the most ambitious. When we have these get-togethers, whether it's 5G or automated vehicles or AI, we're always talking about China. Do you think it is important for the United States as a government to have a plan in order to deal with the changes that are coming from AI? And if so, would you recommend that Congress and the White House focus on continuing to do the work on building out a plan for the country?
Yeah, I'd just say yes, and yes. I think it's critical for the U.S. to have a strategic plan, building on the efforts. There's a lot of good momentum toward that already. We need to continue that, and kind of align plans coming from all the different stakeholders, I think is critically important. It's not just China. China's making a lot of progress, as everybody's, I'm sure, aware of with AI, with the 5-year plan and the government focus on attaining world leadership in AI by roughly 10 years. And I think they're on very good pace to do some amazing things and make amazing progress. And they already have some very impressive AI capability in their public and private industry. So China's on pace there, and their industry is evolving very rapidly as well with their capabilities. Their universities are evolving very rapidly. So it's all those same dimensions we've been talking about that we need to do in the U.S. that China is pursuing, that France and Germany and Italy, Japan, or France, Germany, Japan, Canada, a number of other countries have announced plans for. And I think it's critical for us to have not just the national strategy, but a really concrete action plan and urgency around moving fast. We already are short of talent. We're already behind, I think, on enabling the workforce, that's this transition the workforce with lifelong learning. And we need to accelerate progress in this with urgency and with concrete timelines around it. So I think we're talking about a lot of the right things. It's the concrete plans, the action, the urgency that I think we need to continue to focus on in the U.S.
So we're going to hear from Congressman Will Hurd in a moment, former CIA intelligence officer. He's going to sit down with Nancy Scola, our pro-tech reporter. He's obviously taking a leadership role, as are other members of Congress. In your estimation, based on your work across the globe, working with some of the largest companies across all sectors, do you feel like at this point, you feel like we are falling behind in that race?
We're, my assessment, this is, I'd say this is Paul Daugherty's opinion that I'd say is, I think we're ahead in AI right now. We have the right university structures. We have the educational system that's still attracting the best and brightest to study AI here. Our industries are doing generating amazing innovation with AI in the government, in defense, and other areas. I think we're also taking very strong steps with AI. So I think for where we stand today, I think we're in a strong position. So we shouldn't be crying wolf and saying we've lost the game and we're coming way from behind. I think it's a matter of how do we mobilize the strengths we have that have been building in somewhat of a disjointed fashion, and pull that together to really, again, with urgency, with concrete action and alignment and focus, make sure that we accelerate faster than anybody else is moving with AI. I think that's the action plan. So
as you think about our ability to stay ahead of the race, I always like to use the example of 4G. We established supremacy in 4G. That led to companies like Netflix and Airbnb and Uber, where we were able to dominate certain industries. Do you feel the impact of being the dominant nation in AI will have the same types of effects, and we'll see the creation of entirely new industries and companies that we can't imagine today?
Yeah, absolutely. I subscribe to the view that AI is a bit like electricity in that it's a technology that's spawning it's not just a technology, it's spawning a new way of people to work with technology. It's creating new experiences, new ways for us as people to interact with robots and devices and with each other. It's enhancing our human interaction in the way we communicate. If you think about things like simultaneous natural language translation and things that are going to create very exciting, dramatic new things. And you think about then the combination of AI with things like 5G, and we need to operate on multiple fronts here. It's critical that we stay ahead in 5G as well, because 5G and the unique capabilities of 5G, not just faster bandwidth, but low latency and new capabilities that 5G offers, combined with AI, is going to create a whole new wave of industry for us. You can think of 4G created the app economy. When we did 4G, we ended up with the App Store on the iPhone. We ended up with Uber and business models like this. So 4G created the app economy. 4G in the cloud and IoT, Internet of Things, created the app economy. We're moving with AI and 5G. We're going to move to the experience economy. It's going to be very different. It's not going to be tethered to these phones that we're all staring at to see the news today and texting on. It's going to be pervasive experiences, natural language interaction, virtual and virtual reality and mixed reality, in a very ubiquitous way without these big headsets and things that allow us to operate in a much more human fashion. So that's why you have to look at some of these technologies in a linked fashion. But leadership in things like 5G is important for that reason. Leadership in AI is important because there's a first mover advantage given the way that AI is developed, given the talent imperative, given the training and the repetitive training of the AI algorithms. Benefits do go to the first mover, which is why we need to be ahead.
So we talk a lot about the race against China and other nations for supremacy in 5G. You just talked about how important it is. We had dinner last night with President Juncker from the EU's AI advisor. Where do you see areas for international collaboration?
In AI?
Yes.
I think international collaboration, I think, is essential. So as much as we need to focus on our national plan, as we talked about, that's essential. Right. I think the best and brightest future is continuing very strong international collaboration with AI. I think a future that becomes balkanized where AI and AI research and technology becomes balkanized, I think is a much more dim future. And there's a number of reasons for that. One is a lot of the AI innovations are based on open source technology, which allows it to spread very naturally. So regardless of what country you go to, even in China, it's a lot of the same underlying open source technology that's being used to drive innovation, which is powerful and allows for equal advances. It also allows transparency and understanding how others are operating. So that's one very important fact. The other is just understanding the connection of the technology across different markets. So we have collaboration on industry applications and manufacturing across Europe and the U.S. as an example. So I think the ongoing collaboration I think is really important and helps us create, I think, the right mechanisms in this more positive view of how we apply AI to industry.
So you talk about a number of fascinating topics in your book, but ultimately the pace of this industry is moving so fast. What are the kind of existential risks if we were truly to fall behind in the AI revolution? Because the information, the sort of the decision science, when you establish supremacy in using data, is a tremendous power. Can you just talk a little bit about sort of the risks to falling behind?
Yeah, I mean, there's many risks to falling behind. I think there's a risk to competitiveness. If we fall behind, our industries will be at risk from a competitiveness perspective, and that means impacts on the workforce and employment and quality of jobs and wage growth and such. So competitiveness is essential, and leadership and competitiveness is essential to create the right future for our workforce, for our citizens, et cetera. There's security implications. The bad guys are very good at using AI, machine learning, all these technologies for cyber crime, for cyber attacks and such. So we need to be ahead from a national security and protection perspective in the public and private sector. There's defense, implications of AI in how it's being used in warfare, autonomous weapons and such, that we need better multilateral dialogue on with other countries, but is also a competitive area to make sure we're advancing. And so many, many reasons why this is critical for us. I think but it comes down to the our success as both as for our workforce, for our industry, and then for our country.
So we got to wrap here. Thank you so much. This was, I think, a great introduction to AI and start for the day. And obviously, special thanks to Accenture for being our founding sponsor of the AI Summit. And also, we'd like to thank Cognizant and Intel, our presenting sponsors here today. So very exciting day. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Pleasure.